Welcome back. Welcome back. All right, we're all set up. Um, we got some good picks. Nice. Yeah, welcome back to the anniversary stream. For this next segment, I'll be doing a versus Capcom roster build. Basically like I take a company, I pit them versus Capcom, and then I come up with a prediction for what their roster would be like. I've done four of these already. I've done Shonen Jump versus Capcom. I've done DreamWorks versus Capcom. I've done Square Enix versus Capcom. And the original, the very first one I've done, is Netflix versus Capcom. But today is Sega versus Capcom. This is a fun roster to build. This is a fun roster to build. It was also very stressful for a long time. I uh I was unsatisfied with it, and I don't know if I'm fully satisfied with it still. But I did come up with a final roster, and we're gonna show it today. So as a reminder, we are so close to the 100 follower goal. We're so close to the 100 followers that I need um to stream for the rest of the year. If I hit 100 followers, I will stream for the rest of the year. And I'd love to hit that by the end of this anniversary stream. The goal is to hit it by the end of March. But if I hit it by the end of this anniversary stream, then then we could hit some of these exciting stretch goals over here, like a fighting game stream with Sean at 105 followers, a game on the IOU list getting added to full playthrough Mondays, uh, and extending this stream until midnight, adding another 2 hours to this stream. Those are the things that are on the table. But really, the thing I want the most is just to hit that 100 today. Um, and I also kind of really want that fighting game stream with Sean. I really want Sean to come over and play fighting games with me. But yes, Sega versus Capcom. So yeah, let me break it down. Yeah. The base roster has 30 characters, right? 15 characters on the Capcom side, 15 characters on the Sega side. I did this because that's what I think we can realistically expect from a base roster from a new versus Capcom game. And I've been putting together all these versus Capcom rosters because recently Capcom, not so recently anymore, like a month or two ago, Capcom put out a survey asking what franchises we'd like to see come back. And one of the options was versus Capcom. So basically, I've been doing these thought exercises of seeing what various versus Capcom rosters would be like if they came to fruition. So here's Sega versus Capcom, one that I feel like isn't the most unlikely thing, right? So first, let's start with the guidelines, right? The format would be 2v2. I think this would be a 2v2 game instead of a 3v3 game. Um, just because Sega and Capcom, I think both would want the game to be a bit more accessible. And like accessible by kind of a wider audience. The key mechanic is superstars, right? Which is a play off of Sega Superstars. Honestly, like I'm changing this. I can't change this graphic here. It's too late. But I think I'm gonna change it cosmetically to like an emerald meter, right? It's a special meter for like bursts and power boosts and stuff. Basically, the way the emerald meter would work is like the meter would be like these 7 chaos emeralds, right? And it would fill up slowly over the course of the match. It'd basically be very similar to drive meter in Street Fighter 6, where you can like spend the meter to do things like bursts and like powering up your moves and that kind of thing. If you have your emerald meter filled all the way up, then you can kind of superpower yourself, and that will change some characters cosmetically, like Sonic will become Supersonic if you spend all your emerald meter. And then like the emerald meter will like slowly deplete as like your attack and your speed um and uh and like your health regenerates, right? Kind of like X Factor in MVC3. Can we get Phantom R? How about Choo Choo Rocket? Those those are some fun suggestions. So I guess I'll seg into character guidelines. So character guidelines cover a vast range of IPs, and cover both current and dormant franchises, right? So Sega and Capcom have like their pillars, and I wanted to make sure to hit all of the pillars, like all the main franchises they're focusing on now. But I also wanted to like grab games from both Sega and Capcom's like back catalogs, right? So I can't guarantee the characters you just mentioned. Oh, Phantom R, like from Rhythm Thief. Rhythm Thief is definitely in the dormant category. Yeah, I can't, I can't, I can't guarantee. Actually, I'll straight up say right now, Rhythm Thief isn't in it. I forgot it. I remember Rhythm Thief very briefly, but I will emphasize. I'll kind of re-emphasize here that the base roster is 15 characters on the Sega side and 15 characters on the Capcom side. That means I had to make some cuts. There's a lot of characters I did not have room for, right? Um there will also be DLC, uh a a DLC season of 6 characters and another DLC season of 6 characters. Each season has 3 Sega characters and 3 Capcom characters. So, without further ado, let's hop in. Um So with a lot of these versus Capcom rosters, I like to start with kind of the staples, the characters that are in every Cap versus Capcom game. Um, but Sega versus Capcom specifically, I put a lot of thought into rivalries, characters that would face each other like in the story, and characters that would have cool like rivalries like thematically, right? Um, how many Sonic characters? How many is too many? So actually, yeah, let's get started. Uh, on the topic of rivalries, right? Like let's get the most obvious Sega character out of the way real quick. There he is. This one was easy to see coming, right? Sonic the Hedgehog. Um, wait, hold on. Let me hop in here real quick just so I can okay. Sonic the Hedgehog. Like that's pretty obvious. Not too easy to see coming. He's too fast. Like, yeah, we saw that one coming, but obviously Sonic's going to be in Sega versus Capcom. He's going to be kind of one of the faces of the game. He's going to be important in the story, obviously. Um, and usually I would start Capcom with Street Fighter characters, right? But I have a very specific rival character in mind for Sonic, and a rival franchise in mind for Sonic's franchise. All I gotta do is find this little sucker. Where'd he go? It would be. Wouldn't it be funny if I forgot to put him here? I think I did. I think I forgot to. That's incredible. All right, one sec. Stand by. What a funny oversight I've made. Um, I forgot to put one of like the main characters. I think like my brain just kind of assumed that I already made him. That's so funny. Okay. All right. So here's what we'll have to do. Here's what we'll have to do. It's funny. This is the one that was supposed to go smoothly. I had this all ready. I had this ready to go. Okay. So, right now, this looks like Mega Man X, but it's actually classic Mega Man. It's actually classic Mega Man. Um, we're gonna put X here as a placeholder because it turns out that I forgot to make Mega Man. It was so obvious, right, in my head. It's like, oh yeah, obviously I made Mega Man. It'd be stupid of me not to include the Mega Man asset, and and it was so obvious that my brain convinced myself that I'd already done it. So that says X, but it's actually classic Mega Man. And basically, Mega Man is like the rival franchise for Sonic, right? So over on the Sonic side, we also have Amy Rose, kind of a no-brainer. Yeah, she's one of the most important characters in the Sonic franchise. She's great like female character representation. And yeah, like I think she'd have a really fun move set that would heavily involve her hammer. You know, she'd be kind of a bruiser, which you might not expect if you don't know much about the Sonic franchise, but I think she'd have a pretty fun fighting game move set. And Amy's rival would be another Mega Man character. Tron Bonne. Um, I picked Tron Bonne for Mega Man Legends because she's in a lot of the versus Capcom games, right? She's not quite a staple, but she shows up fairly frequently, and you know she's great. She's got a great move set, and also I think her and Amy's personalities would clash together in a really fun way, right? Like Amy and Tron Bonne are both like really obsessed with their love interests, and they both would absolutely like squabble over who's better, right? I would see them kind of bicker a lot, but eventually kind of grow to respect each other over their kind of mutual strength. Um, you thought it was going to be Roll? I did think about Roll for Sega versus Capcom, but I wanted to represent a variety of like I wanted to represent a bunch of different Mega Man franchises, right? So I have Mega Man representing classic Mega Man, and I decided to have Tron Bonne there as a representative of Legends. So there she is. What if we had Sonic? What if? What if we had Sonic? What a thought. What if we had Sonic? What if he was here? I don't know. That might be a bit too crazy. Um and uh and that is all of the Sonic and Mega Man characters for now. Uh because man, I don't have a lot of space. We might come back to Sonic and Mega Man. They might come up before we're done with the base roster, but that's all we're gonna bring up for now. Um, so let's see. Let's go with another pillar. Let's go with some other pillars. Let's break out the Capcom staple at this point. The characters that we expect to be in every versus Capcom game. We got our boy Ryu. That's a no-brainer. Like Street Fighter is finally one of Capcom's like main money makers again. So Ryu's here. Kind of easy pick. Put him down in the put him down here. We've got Chun-Li. That one's also kind of a no-brainer, right? She's in all of them. Should pull out my list to make sure I'm doing this. the right order and covering the right bases here. And also on the Capcom side, every versus Capcom game has got to have um, there we go. I was making this hard for myself. I forgot how to do this properly. It's got to have Morrigan. Morgan from Darkstalkers. She shows up in Tatsunoko versus Capcom, all the Marvel versus Capcom games. Um, any Capcom developed versus Capcom game, Morgan's going to be in it. So let's go back to Sega and finally like kind of enter some like more interesting territory, right? Um, some of the less obvious stuff because can we have John Talbane? So unfortunately, Morrigan is the only Darkstalkers rep. I thought about John Talbane actually, and I thought about some other Darkstalkers character, but they eventually all kind of fell off the roster to make room for other characters that I thought fit better, other characters that I thought would have cooler rivalries with different Sega characters. So let's break out some of those rivalries now. Ryu's rival is Akira Yuki from Virtua Fighter. Um, I had some other rivals in mind for Ryu, but eventually I fell on Virtua Fighter. Akira Yuki was one of the last characters to get like solidified into the roster. Initially, I had a different Virtua Fighter character in the base roster because I thought Akira Yuki was like kind of boring. He's a bit too much like Ryu. But then I watched some Akira Yuki gameplay and actually like Akira has a very different playstyle than Ryu does. He looks pretty similar to Ryu, but not so much anymore now that Ryu's got like the beard and like the different aesthetic going on. Um and yeah, I think their rivalry would actually be kind of fun and interesting at this point. Akira uses a lot of like judo throws, and his fighting style is very different than Ryu. So seeing them kind of fight, kind of both be kind of the peak of their respective martial arts and kind of face each other from kind of this place of like mutual respect and both kind of considering each other a challenge. I think that'd actually be pretty fun. So Akira Yuki actually kind of accidentally ended up in the base roster. Chun Li's rival is not a Virtua Fighter character, but it's Blaze Fielding from Streets of Rage. One thing that's actually pretty fun about Blaze specifically, I wanted a Streets of Rage rep, and actually Blaze was one of the other characters that I kind of changed like at the last minute. I had a different Streets of Rage character in the base roster, and then I changed it over to Blaze. Um, Because A, I thought her rivalry with Chun Li would be pretty cool, and B, I kind of like the parallels of Blaze and Chun Li. Blaze actually uh, Blaze had some moves, right? Like Blaze took some inspiration from Chun Li in Streets of Rage 1, right? But then in subsequent Streets of Rage games, Blaze got some moves that Chun Li ended up stealing. Like Blaze is stolen from Chun Li, and Chun Li is stolen from Blaze. You know, like Chun Li's like Kiko Show move. Blaze had that first. Uh, so I think historically, it's kind of fun and interesting to have the two of them face off. So Blaze is the Streets of Rage rep and also Chun Li's rival. So before we get to Morrigan's rival, let's get one of Sega's pillar franchises out here. I'm seeing some other suggestions. It's pretty good ones that may come up in the near future. But yeah, let's bring out another one of Sega's pillar franchises. One of the franchises that Sega is putting the most focus on right now. Oh, and thank you for the follow, Bobo Bunga. Appreciate it. God, we're so close to that 100 now. That's awesome. It's Super Monkey Ball. Super Monkey Ball, unfortunately, is not one of Sega's big main franchises. Sorry to report. Persona. So first Persona rep, Joker. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? Joker from Persona 5. He'd be a really cool rushdown character. Um, and you know, he'd be able to summon Arsene. Um, was wondering if we were gonna include Persona. Yeah, absolutely. Persona's just a Sega franchise at this point, right? Sega brings Persona up during all their earnings reports and says, "Hey, look how much money Persona's making. Persona is one of our pillars." So yeah, Persona's here. Um, like Sonic, I had to kind of give myself a stopping point for how many Persona reps I could include. But Joker's here. Joker is easily here. Um, would Gum fit in? Is Gum from a Jet Set Radio? Is that a Jet Set Radio character? I'll be honest, Jet Set Radio is one of the ones where like I had beat in at some point and then I ran out of room and Jet Set Radio isn't even represented in the DLC. What I would do, yeah, Jet Set Radio Future, yeah. What I would do instead, since I didn't end up having any room for Jet Set Radio characters, is that there would be a Jet Set Radio stage in Sega versus Capcom, and you'd see Beat and Gum like grinding on rails in the background and stuff. That's the best I can do is the stage. Sorry. Um, that's fair. Yeah. Uh, let's do Joker's rival real quick because I think Joker's rival is kind of fun. Yeah, for this one specifically, I have rival pairs for the entire base roster, and Joker's rival is Kimberly from Street Fighter Five. Joker's a Phantom Thief. Kimberly's a ninja. I think their energies would match really well. I just imagine in the story like both of them like initially thinking the other is a bad guy, but then kind of teaming up to infiltrate someplace, right? I think their dynamic would be really fun. I think Kimberly kind of weirdly would fit in a Persona game as like a supporting character. Um, so yeah, that's that's the rivalry there. Joker and Kimberly. So Kimberly is the third and final Street Fighter rep in the base roster. You think a literal thief would be a better choice as a rival? Yeah, some of these like some of these for the rivalry, like some of the rivalries are going to be slight stretches, right? Because I gotta consider how much they would belong in the roster. And also sometimes the rivalry is more based off of vibes than anything. Um, and kind of based off of like how cool it would be to see them face off in like a trailer, right? And I think Joker versus Kimberly in a trailer would be fun. Also, like you pointed out, there's not really an iconic thief character in Capcom, right? Like there's not really a Phantom Thief character in Capcom. You like the idea of Joker, Kimberly and Joker interacting? Yeah, me too. That's kind of why I did it. Um, and uh, and yeah, so the next Persona character I'll include is Morrigan's rival, and this is kind of what I mean by like trailer potential and vibes, right? Aegis from Persona 3 slash Persona 3 Reload. Uh, it's actually really cool timing that they recently announced the Answer DLC for Persona 3 Reload, which really focuses heavily on Aegis. Um, Aegis and Morrigan um, are rivals specifically just because imagine the shot in the trailer where they're both flying through the air shooting rockets at each other. Like that's such a perfect like trailer cutscene that's why they're rivals and that's it, you know? Like obviously um Aegis isn't like a supernatural monster and Morgan isn't a persona wielder, but based off of that, and also like Aegis slays demons basically, and Morgan kind of is a demon, so there's also kind of that angle. Uh, but yeah, that would be that would be the rivalry there, and yeah, Aegis Aegis is one of the few Sega characters that kind of has a fighting game moveset already, but I think Capcom's take on Aegis would be a little different than the Persona 4 Arena version of Aegis. But she would utilize her weapons a lot and and her robot abilities and stuff. I think she'd have a really fun Capcom moveset. The third and final Persona rep in the base roster is not quite a Persona rep. You feel like the Capcom version of Iacus would be like a Rekka character? That's a really cool idea. I don't disagree with that. I think that's really cool. Not quite a Persona character, but I think kind of fits in the Persona window of things. Also, this would be a good time for me to clarify is that Sega versus Capcom, like all my versus Capcom rosters, are basically rosters for games that I imagine coming out like 2025 or 2026, right? Uh, like this is what I think will come out like a couple years down the road. Um, and so the roster also reflects what I think the environment for those companies will be like in a couple years or you know a couple years forward. So this character is in a game that's not even out yet, but it's a character that I know that Sega is going to milk that game and create spin-offs of it for the next 5 years. And that's Hulkenberg from Metaphor ReFantasio. Metaphor Fantasio is the new like fantasy game coming out from the Persona 4, Persona 5 team. Persona 3, Persona 4, Persona 5. The next game they're making is this game that's in a new IP, but it's also still connected to the Shin Megami Tensei like major franchise. Um, and Hulkenberg has been like kind of on all the marketing for Metaphor. Um, back when this game was didn't even have a final name, back when this game was just called Project Re Fantasy, the first the first asset we saw for that game was concept art of a character that ended up being Hulkenberg, just this redhead elf girl, with like a big like halberd. Um, yeah, like I don't know what she'd play like because uh the game that she's in is not out yet, but I just know based off of her aesthetic that she'd have a great move set and she has a cool vibe. And who's Hulkenberg's rival if we don't even really know much about her? Well, um, Metaphor Refantasio, she looks like a stance fighter. I think that's not a bad guess. Metaphor Refantasio, you know, you're fighting these demons and these big monsters. We know that much. So Hulkenberg's rival will be a big monster. Astalos from Monster Hunter from the Monster Hunter franchise. Um Astalos is kind of like a roughly human-sized monster, like you know, like 1.5 times the size of humans, so not like too big to being a fighting game, not too big to be in a fighting game. And Astalos has some cool tricks, like a fucking like laser sword that can jut out of its head. Um, and yeah, like Hulkenberg basically like being a monster slayer and trying to like slay Astalos would be kind of the rival justification there. So what's next? I saw someone mention let's actually yeah, let's get some old school reps in here. We've got a lot of modern day stuff, right? Especially especially on the Capcom side. Everyone on the Capcom side except for Tronbon and Morrigan are characters that are like really relevant in the present day. So let's pull some old school characters out and their rivals. So let's see, who should I do first from Sega's back catalog? Okay. Gilius Thunderhead from Golden Axe. Um, you know, also kind of relevant because Golden Axe is going to be one of those games that gets a revival, right? A revival game for Golden Axe is in the works. And yeah, Gilius Thunderhead, like swinging his big axe around, using his thunder magic. I think he'd be a fun fighting game character. And his rival would be none other than Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins. Um, yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward, right? You could easily see why they'd be rivals. You can see why they'd face off. You can see their similarities, but you can see their differences. They they would play very differently from each other, but also have kind of some overlap, like aesthetically and thematically. And Arthur is also, you know, he's been in a decent amount of these versus Capcom games at this point. So here is Arthur making his return. Just stop by while on break to say that you hope to see a character when you check out the VOD later. Very interesting suggestion. We'll see. Very interesting. We'll see. We'll see. Let's get a let's get another retro rep out for Sega. Joe Musashi, aka Shinobi. Um, yeah, I mean, you know, pretty iconic Sega franchise. Uh, cool ninja, a cool ninja guy. He'd do cool Shinobi stuff. Um, and it's funny, this guy almost fell off of the base roster multiple times, but I loved this rivalry so much that I had to keep it on the base roster. And that's Strider. So Shinobi versus Strider, I think would be really fun. I think it'd be really cool. I think, you know, I think it'd be one of those like they initially fight, but then they team up. Um, and yeah, Strider is a beloved versus Capcom character specifically. Versus Capcom fans love having him in their versus Capcom rosters. So like you got to have some of the fan favorites in there. So Strider is there as kind of that fan favorite representation. And let's get one more kind of back catalog character and their rival out. So also from Sega's back catalog is Ulala from Space Channel 5. I think she'd just have a really fun move set, you know? Like her normals and her base attacks are kind of like will be her just doing like dance moves. And her specials will involve her like calling out other dancers and like her super will be kind of her like uh her dance moves being so infectious that the opponent has to dance along with her. I think she'd yeah, I think she'd be a really fun just kind of like stretching of what a fighting game character can be. And just like one of the cool like wacky character options. Ulala's rival, and again, this one's another kind of like loose rivalry based off of vibes. like like kind of another like superficial rivalry. There's going to be some of those, but it's June from Star Gladiator. Felicia from Darkstalkers is not a bad guess, but it's June from Star Gladiators. Um, Felicia's not a bad guess, but yeah. I picked June because June and Ulala are both like girls from space, basically. You know, they're both kind of like sci-fi girls, and June's got like a great aesthetic, and I just like I can kind of see June like dancing along to Lala's songs in a trailer or something, you know? Like I could see like I it's a rivalry, but in the game they would be friends. In the game they would just get along, and June would love Ulala's vibe and vice versa. Um also I wanted to have some Capcom characters that have never been in a versus Capcom game before. So June from Star Gladiator I think would be a great fit. And you know, yeah, Star Gladiators has been dead for a long time, and this would be a really cool way to kind of bring it back. That's a cute bick, and you can totally see them being sassy cute towards each other. Exactly. Exactly. They both had the sassy cute vibe. They're both from space. June and Ulala. You haven't seen Ulala since Sonic Racing Transformed? Yeah. I think it might have been that long since the last time they've brought Ulala. Actually, I think within the past few years there was a Space Channel VR game, and Ulala was in that, but she wasn't like the main playable character, I don't think. All right. Um cool. So we got some more classic dormant franchises out. So let's go back to one of Sega's pillars, one of Sega's big main franchises. Resident Evil, one of Sega's main big franchises. But you might see Resident Evil in a hot second. Oh, we have a correct guess in the chat. Kazuma Kiryu from Like a Dragon slash Yakuza. Um, yeah, he's got to be in here. One one thing that actually had me hesitant to put him in here initially was um anytime like the director of like both like the director and the producer of the Like a Dragon games, right? Um Apparently they'd both been approached multiple times for Kazuma Kiryu to like show up in a crossover game, and they would always say no uh because those fighting games would have female playable characters in them, and Kiryu would never hit a girl. Never ever. Um so like so that is a deal breaker for Kiryu to show up in any crossover game. However, both those members of the staff are no longer with Sega. Um and I feel like Sega leadership would like money too much to not include Kiryu in a crossover game. You know, they would just kind of emphasize that it's non-canon, and Kiryu would still never hit a woman for real. And they would make sure that he'd have no female opponents in the story mode. That's some staunch resolve. Yeah, right? Like that. Honestly, I kind of respect them sticking to their guns that much. Um, but like, you know, like narratively, these crossover games never matter, and I think everyone knows that. Um, it'd be funny if they did something like they do with Sanji in fighting games, like Sanji One Piece Sanji, just like they give Sanji a completely different move set for when he fights women. Where it doesn't involve him making physical contact with them, but instead he like shoots hearts at them and stuff. It'd be funny if they did that for Kiryu, but I doubt they'd figure out a way to do that in a balanced way. So, all right, so Kiryu And who did I put down as his rival? I think this one was kind of a weird one, honestly. Oh, actually, I kind of like this one. Well, so yeah, obviously Kiryu also has like amazing like moveset potential, right? Like his he'd be an amazing fighting game character. So Kiryu's rival is another kind of like anime martial artist that's like kind of rough around the edges. And that's Gene from God Hand. I think Kiryu versus Gene would actually be kind of a pretty cool matchup. You know, they've just got like Gene would not like Kiryu's vibe and vice versa. Like Gene's a bit too like sarcastic and assholey for Kiryu's very noble vibe, and I think that would make them clash and kind of rub each other the wrong way, right? And yeah, they both do like um kind of over the top martial arts with a lot of like grappling and like beating the shit out of each other. And she's another character that's never been in a versus Capcom game that is kind of a demanded character. You know, there's kind of a lot of support for Gene to show up in one of these. So yeah, so Gene from God Hand. Oh, and I see a request in chat that's actually perfect. There's one more Yakuza rep in the base roster. That's Ishiban from from the from the current saga of Like a Dragon. Um yeah, I think like he's technically the main character, right? Like Kiryu's the face of Yakuza. Kiryu's the face of Like a Dragon, but Ishiban is technically the main character right now. So if we're having Yakuza representation, he kind of has to be in the base roster. Um and there were actually multiple times where I like moved him off the base roster, made him DLC, removed him from the roster altogether, and that never felt right. He has to be in the main roster. So here he is. And I think he'd have a lot of fun with his move set because like he makes a lot of references to JRPGs and stuff. He also like has a lot of cool like grapples, so like I think he'd be kind of a grappler with some weird mechanic that kind of reflects his obsession with RPGs. Ishiban's rival is Jill Valentine from Resident Evil. Um Cody is an amazing thought. Cody would be a great rival for Ishiban. Like, yeah, that hits it on vibes. Um, that that hits, yeah, that's fantastic. And he could even be a Final Fight rep instead of a Street Fighter rep. But um, but I didn't go that route. Uh, Instead, Jill would be investigating Ishiban and trying to arrest him because he's really sketchy and weird. But eventually they would team up uh because they both kind of believe in the greater good. That's one of the loosest rivalries, honestly. Like I needed a Resident Evil rep, and I picked Jill because Jill's one of Jill hasn't been in a versus Capcom game in a little bit, and she's kind of one of the better candidates. You know, she's always an important, relevant Resident Evil character. You wish we had Leon. I put Leon in Netflix versus Capcom. Leon was in Netflix versus Capcom, and I like putting Leon in versus Capcom games, but for some reason I felt like Jill was a better fit for Sega versus Capcom. Okay, so only three characters left on each side, um, for the base roster. Ooh, okay. She's from God Hand. This is the best roster I've done yet. I know. I feel this is. I feel like not everyone in chat satisfied with this roster, and I wouldn't blame them. Like it's tough. It's tough to make a base roster of 30 that represents everyone that should be represented. You know. But okay. You love this roster. Cool, cool. You wish we had you from Persona 4. Yeah, it was tough. I had to make some tough cuts for for Persona, you know? Like it couldn't be entirely a Persona roster. If it was 15 Persona characters, you would be there. But okay, let's put here's here's one of my favorite rivalries. Here's one of my favorite rivalries in the base roster. So we got Dante. Dante's basically a staple of versus Capcom at this point. I feel like he's going to show up in every versus Capcom game from MVC3 forward, right? He's got a really like annoying move set. He's a beloved character. So like Dante's kind of obvious, but his rival on the Sega side is Bayonetta. Um yeah, I think this would be one of the face-offs that would be kind of the reason for Sega versus Capcom to exist, right? Like cuz Bayonetta exists because of Devil May Cry, right? Bayonetta was the game that was made after the creators of Devil May Cry split off from Capcom and founded Platinum Games, right? So for Dante and Bayonetta to get to like meet each other and face off, this is one of the most important rivalries in the game. Um, yeah, that'd be one of the coolest things to have them actually like meet each other and fight each other. So so yeah, Dante versus Bayonetta. Solid. Thank you. I think so too. Yeah. That one I'm proud of. That one I was really happy to put in. Okay, and then finally, so we've got a couple of like kind of we've got kind of the weirdo reps. The Sega one is weirder than the Capcom one. And then finally, every roster I do has like a boss character, right? Like basically, there's a boss character on the Sega side, a boss character on the Capcom side. Both those bosses are playable, but then in the story mode, those bosses like combine forces and and create like an unplayable boss combination somehow, right? Like like in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, how Sigma and Ultron fuse to become Ultron Omega, right? Like stuff like that kind of thing. But first, we'll get the weirdo characters out of the way. Capcom isn't as much of a weirdo, but weirdos is Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic's here already. Why do people keep suggesting Sonic? He's here already. So Captain Commando on the Capcom side. Um, you know, he hasn't been in a versus Capcom game in a bit, and he's great. Like he's kind of like I think it's always fun to include him as kind of like this rejected Capcom mascot. He would call in all his friends, like yeah. Captain Commando would be here, but his rival. Uh, so like Captain Commando's here is kind of this big, you know, this like faux badass kind of representing himself as like the champion of Capcom, and this macho guy representing himself as the champion of Sega is Segata Sanshiro from the Sega Saturn commercials. And this is absolutely on the table because Segata Sanshiro has cameoed in Sega games before. He was in Project X Zone as a playable character. So they would absolutely put him in, like him and Captain Commando would fight and then team up. Um, and yeah, like Segata Sanshiro would have kind of a martial arts gameplay like play style, but also several of his moves would reference Sega games that I was unable to represent in the Sega versus Capcom roster. Mainly Sega Saturn games, obviously. But yeah, that would be his deal. That would be his vibe. So the boss characters maybe are a bit predictable if you're looking at this roster. And again, as a reminder, this isn't X. This is Classic Mega Man. I forgot to make the asset for Classic Mega Man. So on the Capcom side, we've got Dr. Wily. And on the Sega side, we've got Dr. Eggman. The two of these would absolutely team up over the course of the story, uh, and build like an Egg Wily robot together. That would be like the unplayable final boss of the story. I decided to have Classic Mega Man in the story instead of X, so that Classic Mega Man would get to like interact with his villain, would get to Classic Mega Man would get to interact with Dr. Wily and have a meaningful face off against him, just like Sonic would get to have a meaningful face off with Dr. Eggman. Skull Egg Robot, yeah. Yeah, Skull Egg Robot. And yeah, those guys would be the main antagonists through the story. Um this roster doesn't have a lot of villain characters in it. So basically, the story mode would basically be uh Dr. Eggman and Dr. Wily like making robot clones of all the other playable characters that you would fight in the story mode as enemies. And by beating the story mode, you unlock robot costumes for all of the main playable characters. That's how I would handle that. That's how I would that's how I would give you enemies in the story mode. And that's the base roster, man. We got Sonic the Hedgehog, Amy Rose, Dr. Wily, Kazuma Kiryu, Ishiban Kasuga on the Sega side. Classic Mega Man, not X. Tron Bonne, Dr. Eggman, Jill Valentine, Jean on the Capcom side. We got Joker, Aegis, Hulkenberg, Akira Yuki, Blaze Fielding on the Sega side, Ryu, Chun Li, Kimberly, Morrigan, and Astalos on the Capcom side. Gilius Thunderhead, Shinobi, Ulala, Bayonetta, and Segata Sancho on the Sega side, and Arthur, Strider Hiryu, June, Dante, and Captain Commando on the Capcom side. So that leaves the DLC. We got 2 seasons of DLC, 6 characters each. And and yeah, this was tough, like it was really difficult to come up with a good roster that covers covers everyone's main franchises, but also like has some fun deep cuts and stuff in there. So I try to do a little bit of both again when I get to the DLC. So the first DLC character on the Sega side is Shadow. Um so yeah, there's only room for, oh my god, I messed up. Um I put Dr. Eggman on the Capcom side and Dr. Wily on the Sega side. Oopsie. Okay, that's better. So yeah, so I was only able to include 3 Mega Man characters and 3 Sonic characters in the base roster. So real quick, the DLC gives us another Sonic character, right? And I think Shadow is kind of far and away the most obvious option. Sonic Shadow would not be a clone of Sonic. He'd play very differently. Like, his movement is different because of his rollerblades. He's got teleports. Uh um he's got chaos control. He has so many different tools than Sonic does that they would not play anything like each other. And you know at this point, right, 2025, 2026, at this point, the the Sonic the Sonic 3 movie is out. Shadow's a big deal. He probably will have his own spin-off show at this point. Um yeah, he's a no-brainer. He's a no-brainer for the first DLC rep. He feels like a rushdown zoner character. Yeah, I think that's a great call. Yeah, like he gets up and close uh with like combos and like spins up in your face, but then also he can like kind of keep you at bay with chaos control. He's kind of an all-rounder. He kind of has like a lot of different tools. And the first Capcom rep might feel kind of obvious right now is Zero from Mega Man X. So yeah, so like classic Mega Man from Mega Man, Dr. Wily also from Mega Man, Tron Bonne from Legends. We need a Mega Man X character, and Zero is far and away the most popular Mega Man X character, maybe even more popular than Mega Man X himself at this point. So So Zero also, like Shadow and Zero, I don't do rivals as much once we get into the DLC, but Shadow and Zero would also make pretty great rivals to each other. You're wondering when Zero was coming in? Yeah, Zero's here as DLC. Also, a good reason that he's here is because people would spend money. People would spend extra money to buy Zero after buying the base game. So yeah, he's also kind of a no-brainer as a DLC character. The next DLC character, however, is bringing in another rep from one of Sega's pillars. Actually, one of Sega's already established pillars. Um, the Angry Birds. Does Sega wait? Does Sega own Angry Birds? They bought Angry Birds recently, didn't they? Didn't dang. You might have caught me actually. Yeah, that's right. Sega owns Angry Birds as of 2023. Damn. That that slipped by me, man. I should have put the Angry Birds in this game. I should have put an Angry Bird in here, maybe as DLC. But they're not here. I'll say straight up right now, there's no Angry Birds in this roster. Damn, damn. Yeah, that would have been a great. That would have been yeah. Wave three, the third DLC season. Yeah, maybe. But third character in DLC season one is Naoto Shirogane from Persona 4. One of the toughest things about doing the base roster is realizing that I did not have room for a Persona 4 character. And Persona 4 is obviously like still a big deal. Um I didn't want to just do protagonists, right? I didn't want to just do like if the Persona side of the roster was just the protagonist of 5, the protagonist, if it was just Joker, you uh Makoto Yuki, like that'd feel like it was missing something, Like there's such a wide range of Persona characters. So I picked Naoto because she's one of the most popular Persona 4 characters, and also I think her move set with her gun would make her feel very different and cool and fun. So there she is. The Hunter from Monster Hunter. So Monster Hunter was one of those characters where I wanted to put them in, but I didn't have room. So Ashlos is kind of the sole Monster Hunter representation as a monster from Monster Hunter. Um, However, we are going to add representation to a franchise right now on the Capcom side. Oop. That's Lady Dimitrescu from Resident Evil 8. She was actually in the base roster at some points, but I ended up moving her to DLC. Yeah, I've brought her up in other versus Capcom rosters. I put her in Netflix versus Capcom. I think she's also in Shonen Jump versus Capcom. Yeah, I think she'd be an amazing fighting game character. Just this, this big bruiser with this incredible character design. And Resident Evil definitely deserves to have multiple reps as one of Capcom's pillar franchises. Yeah, big hit super armor, very much needed for a fighter. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, just big beefy bruiser character. I think Dimitrescu would be perfect for that. And the last Sega character of DLC Season 1, I think might be. I can see this being like the most heavily demanded character in the game. And that's Goro Majima from Like a Dragon slash Yakuza. I think yeah. It's funny, there were some points where I tried to put Majima on the base roster, but Ichiban made more sense. He's the current protagonist of the franchise, and also I think people would happily spend more money on Goro Majima. Majima is absolutely like, like, hey, get the season pass and you get Goro Majima as a playable character. They're making tons of fucking money. Yeah, Majima make Majima like $6 when everyone else is like $4. Yeah, yeah, I think they'd get away with it. I think they'd get away with it. And yeah, he just, have this great like brutal fighting style. He'd be insane, of course. Like, uh, yeah, yeah. No, I'd love to see him in a versus Capcom game. So he would be kind of the clincher, the last Sega character for DLC 1. Get people really excited to get that season. Um, but we shouldn't just have like we shouldn't just be adding to existing franchises. We need some new franchise representation in here. So the last DLC character is still a character that I feel would be like heavily anticipated and kind of a demanded character that people would be excited about. Batsu from Rival Schools. Um yeah, like Rival Schools is kind of a dormant franchise for Capcom right now, but it shouldn't be. Um and yeah, I think people would be really excited to see Batsu as a playable character. His last appearance I think was Tatsunoko versus Capcom, and it was really cool to see him in that. Um so yeah, I think he'd be a cool surprise, and I think he'd have a fun versus Capcom move set. He already kind of has one. Um Also, the idea of him fighting Majima is very funny now that I'm thinking about that. So, all right, one last season of DLC, Sega versus Capcom. The first Sega character of DLC Season 2, I realized that we needed some more like dormant franchise representation. So we got Knights from Knights into Dreams. Knights was initially in the base roster, uh, and my first idea for Morgan's rival actually, just kind of both of them like dancing through the air, like flying through the air together. But eventually I felt like I just needed to be in the base roster. So Knights got demoted to DLC, but I think Knights would be fun DLC, Like like Knights should have like a flight mechanic and do like cool loop de loops and stuff. Like really, really cool, like flashy air combos. I think Knights would be fun. Knights is a must buy. or Batsu is a must buy. Either way, either of those characters would have my money personally. Here's another character that was initially in the base roster, but Batsu is the must buy. Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. Uh, Here's another character that was almost in the base roster, but I ended up having to make room for another character. And that's Phoenix Wright. Um uh from Ace Attorney, from the Phoenix Wright franchise. Um Initially Phoenix Wright was my first idea for Ichiban Kasuga's rival. Um and my thought was that like Phoenix would have to represent Ichiban in court for, for being like framed for a crime or something. Uh but I ended up replacing him with Jill because there needed to be a Resident Evil character in the base roster, and Ace Attorney getting base roster representation was a little less important. But yeah, but Phoenix does still need to be in the game, so here he is. Um, and he just brings back his move set from Marvel vs. Capcom 3 mostly, because that's still one of the best fighting game move sets of all time. Knights would be a neat fighter though. Yeah, I think so too. Light hero bait. That's funny. I didn't think of that. That's funny. All right, gotta get some unrepresented franchises in here. You would play Phoenix Wright though. Yeah, Phoenix Wright was like the closest thing I had to a main in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom. Like I loved Phoenix Wright in that game, and I want him in more fighting games. Just with that moveset, just with that exact moveset. Next up on the Sega side, Silvaria Bless from Valkyria Chronicles. Um, yeah, I think she'd have a cool fucking moveset. I think Valkyria Chronicles is this great underrated Sega game. Um, yeah, she has that fucking lance that just like shoots beams out of it. God, that'd be a cool fighting game moveset. And she's even been in a fighting game before. She's been in Dengenki Bunko Fighting Climax. Um, but I think Capcom could make her moveset like even cooler and more interesting than her moveset was in that. Um, yeah, I think she'd be cool DLC. So there she is. And on the Capcom side, while Valkyria Chronicles is now more of a dormant franchise, we're going very current for the next Capcom character. And the idea is that they'd want to push and promote this game even if this character is not necessarily one that would be in very high demand. And that is the Zephyr from Exo Primal. Um, Exo Primal, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't even know what Exo Primal was, but Exo Primal is this Capcom game that came out pretty recently. That's basically kind of this PVE slash PvP, like third person shooter, uh, where you are basically a bunch of like people in robot suits like shooting dinosaurs, right? It's like robots versus dinosaurs basically. Um, That's a deep cut. It's funny because it really shouldn't be. It's one of the games that Capcom is pushing like right now, right? Like you watch any like Capcom Direct like presentation, they're going to have Exoprimal news in that direct. But it does feel like a deep cut at the same time, right? Because it doesn't feel like the game's as popular as Capcom wants it to be. It doesn't feel like people are really playing it. So my thought would be if this game, if Sega versus Capcom came out next year or the year after, they'd want to put an Exoprimal character in there to remind people that Exoprimal exists. So Zephyr would be kind of a rushdown character with kind of those like robot tonfa things, and like really like have they'd have Rekka moves and stuff and really be able to like get in your face. And like their move set would be so cool that maybe Zephyr would show up in other versus Capcom games even long after Capcom has given up on Exoprimal as a franchise. There's my very long-winded prediction for how that franchise is going to turn out, but please play our game exactly. Yeah. All right, we're down to the last two. We're down to the last two DLC characters, and that'll be our whole roster. Oh, I did this in the wrong order actually. Um, I was looking at the wrong column because Goro Majima was supposed to be the last rep for DLC 2. He was supposed to be the this is what we're finishing out with. Please give us your money. Please be excited. Um, and this is supposed to be the last rep for DLC Season 1, but I still think this is an exciting pick. I still think people would pay money for this. People would be excited about this. Arle Naja. Oh man, I forgot about Arle Naja. That's on me. Vice from Skies of Arcadia. And I will actually swap Vice with Goro. Um, and make Vice the last rep for DLC 1 and Goro the last rep for DLC 2. I think that fits more. I think Goro makes more sense as like the blockbuster closer for the whole roster on the Sega side. But Vice from Skies of Arcadia, I think, would also be get a lot of hype, especially from like certain corners of the gaming fan industry, right? Um, he Vice would be a team fighter. Oh, like he'd call in like other members of his crew. That could be fun. Yeah, I think it'd be cool. Like even just as like his own dude. I think it'd be fun even just as his own dude doing like sky pirate shit. You know, I think even that would be like cool as hell. But yeah, Vice's DLC for sure. And yeah, let's yeah, Goro is actually the final Sega DLC character. Sorry, Majima is actually that, and then Vice would be the guy that comes up right before Batsu does. The last Capcom DLC character is Ruby Hart from MVC2. I think like I think we're pulling from all these different games and franchises from both the Sega and Capcom sides. And I think it'd be really cool and really poetic if the last Capcom character pulls from a versus Capcom game, right? Like it'd be kind of a nod to their history and an acknowledgement of the fact that we're probably never seeing another Marvel versus Capcom game. So Ruby Hart would show up as the last DLC character for Sega versus Capcom, and it'd be kind of a triumphant return for her. And then that would close out the Sega versus Capcom roster with 42 characters. Shadow the Hedgehog, Zero from Mega Man X, Naoto Shirogane from Persona 4, Lady Dimitrescu from Resident Evil 8, Vice from Skies of Arcadia, and Batsu from Rival Schools in Season 1. And then Season 2 would have Knights from Nights into Dreams, Phoenix Wright from Ace Attorney, the Zephyr from Exo Primal, Silvaria Bless from Valkyria Chronicles, Goro Majima from Like a Dragon, and finally Ruby Heart. And there you go. That's Sega versus Capcom. Hope you enjoyed. I really love doing versus Capcom rosters. Great roster as always. These have been a lot of fun. Thank you. Yeah. No, I really like doing these. I have another roster made, but I haven't made the assets for it yet. I haven't put the assets into OBS yet. And that's Hasbro versus Capcom. I will do Hasbro versus Capcom on some other day. And then after that, I think it might be fun to do season 3 of DLC for all the rosters I've made prior, right? Like go back and give Square Enix versus Capcom a season 3, give a season 3 to Sega versus Capcom, give a season 3 to DreamWorks versus Capcom, right? Um so yeah, if you enjoyed this, um yeah, more versus Capcom will happen on my channel down the line. So if you want to give me a follow, that'd be amazing. And if you're watching the VODs of this on YouTube, um, I'm twitch.tv/ThorAsZ. If you haven't seen my other versus Capcom rosters and want to check out me building those, I have VODs for those both here on Twitch and also on my YouTube channel, which you can find a link to, here on my Twitch page. Yeah, and that includes DreamWorks versus Capcom, that includes Netflix versus Capcom, Shonen Jump versus Capcom, Square Enix versus Capcom, and now Sega versus Capcom. Thank you for the follow, Delapana. Holy shit. One follower away from my 100 follower goal. Once I hit that goal, I'm going to commit to streaming for the rest of the year, and that will also include other versus Capcom streams and other fighting game prediction streams. I think it'd be fun to kind of branch out and predict other kinds of fighting games, like what if Microsoft, with all the companies they own, did their own version of Smash Bros, right? Like that kind of thing. It'd be really fun to put those kind of rosters together. So yeah, I just need to get one more follower in the next 4 hours. And then that'll be locked in, baby. Hasbro versus Capcom, very cool. I'm very excited to show my Hasbro versus Capcom roster. I had a lot of fun putting that one together. Um, yeah, I guess last thing, Sega kind of sucks as a company. Um, like they've they've been union busting. They've been laying off employees left and right. Um, so sometimes it wasn't super fun to put this roster together, but it was a really fun exercise to like put all these IPs together and figure out how they would interact. And I think that always is a fun, worthwhile exercise. But yeah, I also it would be remiss of me not to bring up that like Sega's up to some garbage, and to kind of encourage everyone to be annoying to Sega and try to get them to stop. Quick question: how close was I to including Echo the Dolphin? Um, Not close. Sorry, Vinny. Sorry, man. I was not close to including Echo the Dolphin. Actually, here, have some cut content. Here's some characters that uh here's some characters that I made assets for, but then ran out of the route, like made some last minute decisions that pushed them out of the roster completely. Um and actually that this is uh the cut content for this is huge. There's a lot of characters that I cut for this. I mentioned that that initially I had a different Streets of Rage character besides Blaze Felding. That was Shiva instead. Initially I had Shiva as the Streets of Rage rep instead. Because Shiva's really popular. He's a badass. I thought he'd be cool with like some villain representation on the base roster. But eventually I thought Blaze would be a better fit uh a better fit for Chun-Li than a different rival for Chun-Li that I had cut. Shiva's rival was going to be Hagar from Final Fight. I wanted to have some Final Fight representation in Capcom, and I thought that Streets of Rage versus Final Fight would be great. I thought that'd be really good. Um, but yeah, eventually, like I needed room for I need room for Captain Commando so he could be Segata Sanshiro's rival. You know, like I ended up pushing Hagar out of the base roster as well. The rival I had in mind for Chun Li initially, before Akira Yuki ended up in the final roster, was Sarah Bryant from Virtua Fighter. I thought her versus Chun Li was a pretty cool rivalry, but eventually, like like I thought Sarah Bryant also like had a better aesthetic than Akira Yuki. I thought she'd be a more interesting Virtua Fighter rep than Akira Yuki. But when I was looking at her moveset versus Akira's moveset actually ended up being more interesting, and I shuffled things around to fit Akira in instead of Sarah. Um, I almost put Akira Kazama in instead of Batsu, uh, because I love her vibe, I love her aesthetic, I love her moveset, but but I finally decided, you know what, Akira Kazama has been in a Capcom game pretty recently. She was in Street Fighter 5 not too long ago, just a few years ago. It would be cooler and more exciting if Batsu finally returned as opposed to Akira returning after not that long. So I regretfully removed her from the roster and from the DLC. Um, and there's a few more cut characters, but I'm looking at them and honestly, like if I do a DLC season 3, those characters will probably be there. So I won't show you guys those characters just yet in case I do season 3 for those characters down the line. But yeah, and enjoy the that little sneak peek at some characters that I cut from the final roster. Okay, there we go. That's Sega versus Capcom. Phoenix Wright as DLC is a W. Yeah, for sure. You can't wait for Tekken. Okay, yeah, speaking of which, okay, so um where's so up next, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. doing online matches with viewers. That is going to start with Tekken. If other people online want to fight me in other things after some Tekken, I'll be open to doing more of that. And then 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'll kind of see what you guys want to do. Whoever's still here, whoever's still watching, I'll see what you guys want to do more of. If you guys want me to recommend manga to you, I'd be happy to do that. If we want to play more fighting games together, I'd be happy to do that. We'll see how the stream closes off depending on the vibe. Got to go for now. Great stream. You'll try to come back later. Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for dropping by and watching. Thank you. Um and And yeah, so that's up next. And yeah, here's another peek at the follower stretch goals. We are almost at 100, which will secure streams from me for the rest of the year. And we're also really close to a fighting game stream with my good friend and podcast co-host Sean. Um, so yeah, that's that for now. I'm gonna go on break real quick so I can walk my dog and feed him. Um, but then when I come back, we uh we will get Tekken 8 underway. We'll do some Tekken. Okay. All right, see you guys in a bit.